When a daughter uncovers the lie that destroyed her family, she doesn't just chase justice, she becomes it. The Sound of Ashes is a haunting story of love, betrayal, and redemption set against the backdrop of storm-soaked nights and smoldering truth. Every frame drips with emotion, a woman's war between forgiveness and fury, between what was lost and what still breathes in memory. It's not just about clearing a father's name, it's about reclaiming her own. Sometimes, the fire doesn't destroy you, it forges you. The rain had been falling for hours, turning the streets into mirrors that reflected a sky too heavy to hold its own grief. A black car cut through the mist and stopped in front of the old courthouse, not grand, just a relic of justice long decayed. When the door opened, Rebecca Cole stepped out, her trench coat soaked, her eyes shadowed beneath the brim of her hat. In her hand, she held a single envelope, water-stained but sealed, marked only with one word: verdict. 6 years had passed since she'd last stood here, in the same town that had devoured her father's name and spat her out like an accomplice to a crime she didn't commit. Now, she was back, not for forgiveness, but for closure. Inside, the courthouse smelled of wet paper and silence. The flickering lights hummed above her as she walked past peeling walls and half-torn wanted posters until she reached the clerk's counter. The boy behind it didn't recognize her. No one did anymore. "For Judge Whitlow," she said, sliding the envelope forward. "It's about Case 317. He hesitated, confused, before footsteps echoed from the far end of the hall, measured, familiar, steady. She didn't turn. She didn't have to. That sound had lived in her memory like a curse. "Rebecca," came the voice, smooth, precise, Andrew Foster. The man who once promised her the truth, then built his career on burying it. The man who sent her father to prison. She turned, meeting his gaze with a quiet, lethal calm. "Still hiding behind your charm, I see." He smirked, but the confidence in his eyes flickered. "Still blaming everyone but yourself." The silence between them stretched, filled with all the words they never said, all the years she spent running from a past he'd rewritten. "I didn't come to fight," she said finally. "I came to end it." "And what?" he asked, voice low, wary. "The lie you built," she whispered. Thunder rolled outside, a low growl beneath the ceiling's hum. She drew the folded document from her coat, evidence she had hunted for across continents, proof that her father had been framed by the man standing before her. But she didn't hand it to him. Not yet. She wanted him to feel it first, the inevitability. "You told me once truth would set us free," she said softly. "You were right. It just took me longer to find it." She laid the envelope on the counter, her fingers brushing it like a final goodbye, then turned and walked out into the pale aftermath of rain, leaving Andrew frozen under the courthouse lights as the word verdict glared up at him like a ghost. The sky was clearing, but the air still trembled, calm, heavy, waiting. The kind of quiet that only comes before something breaks. The diner across from the courthouse hadn't changed, same cracked vinyl seats, same buzzing neon sign half flickering over the window that still bore the ghostly outline of open, even when it wasn't. Rebecca sat in the corner booth, hands wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee that had long gone cold. Outside, the courthouse loomed in the glass reflection like a shadow she couldn't shake. She had done what she came to do, delivered the evidence, laid the truth at their feet, yet instead of relief, she felt something heavier settling in her chest, an ache shaped like unfinished business. The waitress, a woman with tired eyes and lipstick smudged to imperfection, poured her a refill and said softly, "You look like someone who's been here before." Rebecca managed a small smile. "Feels like I never left." The woman nodded, the way people do when they recognize quiet suffering, then moved on without another word. Rebecca's phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. She hesitated before answering. "You didn't waste any time." Andrew's voice came through, sharp, composed, but there was something underneath, an edge of panic he tried to hide. "Where did you get it?" She leaned back, eyes on the rain tracing paths down the window. "Truth has a way of finding its way home," she said. "Even after 6 years." There was silence on the line, then the low sound of him exhaling. "You think this changes anything?" he asked. You think dragging up the past fixes what's broken? She closed her eyes for a moment. No, but it ends the lie. Then she hung up. Her reflection in the window looked older, harder. The kind of face that belonged to someone who had stopped believing in clean victories. Her father's voice echoed faintly in her memory. Justice isn't about winning, Becca. It's about balance. He had said that the night before the verdict, when he already knew the odds were against him. She had believed him then. Now she wasn't sure if balance was even possible in a world built on power and perception. The door chimed as someone entered. Rebecca didn't look up until a shadow fell over her table. Still drinking that bitter stuff, came a familiar voice, low, amused, familiar in the way a wound is familiar. She turned. Haley, her sister. Dressed impeccably as always, wedding ring glinting under the cheap diner light. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Haley slid into the booth opposite her, eyes steady but distant. Andrew called, she said. He's upset. Rebecca let out a humorless laugh. He should be. You don't know what you're doing, Haley warned. You're reopening wounds that don't need to bleed again. Rebecca's eyes lifted, cold but calm. They never stopped bleeding, Hales. You just learned to pretend you don't see it. Haley's expression faltered, and for a heartbeat, she looked younger, like the sister Rebecca used to protect from everything. You think this will bring Dad back? She asked quietly. He's gone. He's been gone for years. Rebecca's throat tightened. I'm not doing this to bring him back. I'm doing it so when they say his name, it isn't followed by shame. Her voice cracked on the last word, barely audible. Haley reached out as if to touch her hand, but stopped midway. You always needed a villain, she said softly. And you chose Andrew because it's easier than facing what Dad really did. Rebecca met her gaze, eyes glistening but unbroken. No, Haley. I chose the truth. Because someone had to. The silence between them was fragile, humming with all the things they couldn't say. Outside, the rain had turned into mist, blurring the edges of the courthouse lights. Haley finally stood, straightened her coat, and said, Be careful, Rebecca. People like Andrew don't lose quietly. Then she walked away, leaving the faint scent of jasmine and regret in her wake. Rebecca stared at the doorway long after she was gone. She didn't notice her phone buzzing again, another unknown number flashing on the screen, a warning she wouldn't hear until it was too late. The night had fallen like a weight, pressing against the small town until every light felt swallowed whole. Rebecca drove without direction, the rain streaking across her windshield like 1,000 unanswered questions. Haley's voice echoed in her head, You always needed a villain. She hated that it lingered, that it made her question everything she thought she knew. Maybe she had built Andrew into a monster. Maybe she needed him to be one, because the alternative, that her father's fall was more complicated than she could bear, was a truth she wasn't ready for. She pulled over on the side of the road, heart pounding, staring at her reflection fractured in the wet glass. The phone buzzed again. Same number. Against her better judgment, she answered. Rebecca Cole? The voice on the other end was low, gravelly, cautious. You don't know me, but you should listen carefully. That file you handed over at the courthouse, it's not what you think. She straightened. Who is this? Someone who worked with your father. I don't have much time, but you're being played. Those documents, half of them are forgeries, fabricated about 2 months ago. Someone wanted you to find them. Rebecca's pulse roared in her ears. You're lying. Check the timestamps, the voice replied. Then tell me who benefits when the two of you destroy each other. The call ended before she could speak. She sat motionless, the sound of rain turning deafening. With trembling hands, she tore open the envelope on the passenger seat and spread the papers across the dashboard. Under the dim interior light, she saw it, mismatched dates, a signature style her father never used, a pattern that didn't fit. The proof she'd carried like a weapon suddenly felt like poison. Someone had built this narrative and she'd walked straight into it. Her breath came shallow. Andrew's face flashed in her mind, not arrogant, not smug, but genuinely afraid. Maybe he wasn't the enemy after all. Maybe they both were. The only place left that might hold answers was the one she'd avoided for years, the old warehouse by the river. She drove there through sheets of rain, headlights slicing through the mist. The gate hung open, half collapsed. Inside, the air smelled of rust, rot, and burnt wood. Her flashlight beam trembled over the remains of crates, papers, and something metallic half buried under debris. She knelt, brushed away the dirt, and uncovered a small rusted lockbox. Inside were files, originals, real signatures, and a flash drive labeled Witness. Her stomach turned. Plugging it into her laptop, she watched as a grainy video flickered to life. A man appeared, her father. His voice shook as he spoke. "If you're watching this, it means they've found me guilty. But the truth is, it's not Andrew. It's bigger than him. They needed a scapegoat, someone loud enough to distract. If they come for you, Becca, run." The screen went black. Rebecca sat frozen, the rain pounding against the roof, her father's final words echoing through the hollow space of the warehouse. And in that moment, she realized the storm wasn't coming, it was already here, and she was standing in the center of it. The drive back to town was a blur of lightning, rain, and raw panic. Every flash illuminating the wreckage of Rebecca's thoughts as she pieced together the truth her father's last words had hinted at. It was never just about Andrew. The storm outside mirrored the one inside her. Betrayal, guilt, and fury collided in a thunderous rhythm as she gripped the steering wheel tighter, realizing that the evidence she'd uncovered wasn't a revelation but a trap. A carefully laid snare meant to turn her grief into a weapon. Her phone buzzed. Haley's trembling voice broke through the storm. Andrew was missing. Rebecca's pulse quickened. He wasn't missing, he was being hunted. Following a single thread, a name buried in the documents, Whitlow Holdings, she raced to the old river docks, the same judge who had sentenced her father now surfacing like a ghost in the dark. The docks were swallowed by fog and rain, the world reduced to the sound of her heartbeat and the slick wood beneath her boots. A flicker of light in the boathouse drew her in, and there he was, Andrew, drenched, hollow-eyed, holding a folder that reeked of danger and regret. "You shouldn't have come," he said, but she already knew it was too late to turn back. The papers told a story far worse than betrayal. Whitlow's corruption, the laundering, the silence bought in blood. Her father hadn't been guilty. He'd been eliminated for knowing too much. "You let me hate you," she whispered, voice shaking. "I thought it was the only way to protect you," he said, pain splintering through every word. The years between them dissolved under the weight of that truth, the hatred that had defined her replaced by something colder, purpose. "We expose him," she said, fire breaking through her voice. "We clear his name." Andrew's jaw tightened. "If we do, we die." She met his gaze, rain dripping from her hair, resolve burning through the fear. "Then we make it loud enough they can't silence both of us." The words hung in the thick air, fragile and defiant, until the distant growl of an engine tore through the night. Andrew's eyes darted toward the window, headlights cutting through the fog, then stepping out into the rain. Rebecca turned to the door, her pulse steady now, every ounce of grief transforming into steel. "Then let them come," she said. And as the first shadow moved closer through the downpour, thunder cracked above, and the storm she had been running from her entire life finally found her. The boathouse became a war zone of silence before the chaos, rain pounding against the tin roof like a warning drum, each drop marking the seconds before everything collapsed. Rebecca crouched behind the wooden pillar, soaked and trembling, her eyes locked on Andrew, who stood near the back entrance with the folder pressed against his chest. Outside, dark silhouettes moved through the mist, flashlights slicing through the rain, their beams glinting off the barrels of guns. Her breath came shallow, fear clawing at her ribs, but beneath it was something sharper, the ache of finally knowing the truth, of carrying both love and rage in the same heart. One of the men stepped into the light, Whitlow's enforcer, the same man who'd driven her father to the courthouse that final day. The sight of him ripped open every scar she thought had healed. "Hand it over, Andrew," the man barked, voice like gravel. Andrew's eyes flicked to Rebecca, then to the folder, his jaw tightening. "This isn't yours to bury," he said. The enforcer's smirk didn't falter. "Neither was your father's life." The shot came like thunder, sudden, absolute, and for a heartbeat, time folded into silence. Andrew stumbled backward, the folder slipping from his hand, paper scattering like broken promises across the wet floor. Rebecca's scream tore through the night as she lunged forward, catching him before he hit the ground. Blood mixed with rain, spreading crimson beneath her knees. His hand trembled as it found hers. "Don't let it end here," he whispered, voice fading like a ghost. Another gun cocked, closer this time, the enforcer closing in, but Rebecca's grief had already turned to something deadly. In one motion, she grabbed the flare gun from the nearby shelf, fired, and the world erupted in a storm of light and fire. The flare struck a barrel, flames licking up the wooden beams, smoke curling around them as the men scrambled. She dragged Andrew's body behind the boat, tears blurring her vision, the heat pressing against her back. "You lied to save me," she whispered, holding his face as the light flickered across it. "Now I'll tell the truth for both of us." Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone must have seen the explosion. She grabbed the folder, clutched it to her chest, and ran through the flames, her father's name echoing in her head with every step. Behind her, the boathouse collapsed in a burst of fire, the night sky swallowing it whole. When she reached the edge of the dock, she turned once more, smoke rising, rain hissing, and in the chaos, a strange peace settling over her. The camera would linger there, on her face, blood, tears, and fire reflecting in her eyes, as she whispered to no one and everyone, "No more silence." Then she stepped into the storm, vanishing into the night, carrying truth like a weapon, like redemption. Dawn crawled over the horizon like a bruise healing in slow motion, soft light spilling across the charred remains of the boathouse, smoke coiling upward in delicate ribbons. The fire had died, but its story was only beginning to spread. News vans crowded the shoreline, reporters spoke into cameras with voices sharpened by curiosity and caffeine, while police officers moved through the wreckage, collecting fragments of what was left, burnt documents, melted metal, the ghosts of the night before. Rebecca sat on the far end of the dock, wrapped in a gray blanket, her hair still damp, her body trembling from exhaustion and cold. The paramedic had offered to take her to the hospital, but she refused. She wasn't broken, not in the way they thought. She was emptied, rewired. The folder sat beside her, its edges singed, its pages half-burned, but legible enough to expose everything Whitlow had buried. The storm had taken much, her father, Andrew, her innocence, but in its aftermath, it had left her something else. Clarity. A detective approached, his shoes creaking against the wooden planks. "Miss Harris," he said quietly, kneeling beside her, "the documents you turned in, they're being verified, but if this holds up, your father, he'll finally be free," she interrupted, her voice soft but steady. He nodded, studying her face with the kind of compassion that comes from years of seeing people who've lost too much. "You did the right thing," he said, rising to leave. But Rebecca didn't answer. The right thing never felt this heavy. She looked out over the water, gray, endless, whispering against the shore, and thought of Andrew's last words. "Don't let it end here." 3 weeks later, the courtroom was packed. The judge's nameplate, Charles Whitlow, had been removed from its brass frame. Cameras flashed, journalists leaned forward, pens ready. Rebecca sat in the front row, a photo of her father in her lap, as the attorney read out the evidence. Bank statements, transcripts, hidden correspondences that painted a trail of corruption leading straight to the top. The truth wasn't cinematic, it wasn't loud. It was quiet, methodical, like justice had been waiting for its moment to exhale. When the verdict came, case reopened, charges retracted posthumously, Rebecca didn't cry. She only closed her eyes and let the sound of the gavel echo through her like a heartbeat she hadn't felt in years. After the trial, she walked out into the sunlight. The city buzzed with traffic and life, as if unaware that a weight had just been lifted from one woman's soul. A young reporter chased after her. "Miss Harris, do you have a statement for the press?" Rebecca stopped, turned, and for the first time in a long while, smiled, small, tired, but real. "Just one," she said. "Truth doesn't die when people do." Then she walked away, her shadow stretching long behind her as the city swallowed her whole. Weeks blurred into months. Rebecca moved back into her father's old house, though it no longer felt haunted. She rebuilt it room by room, not with new furniture, but with peace. She found his old records in the attic, the ones he'd play on Sunday mornings while cooking breakfast. One afternoon, she placed the vinyl on the turntable, and as the first notes filled the room, she finally allowed herself to dance. No tears this time, just quiet movement, like forgiveness translated into rhythm. Later that evening, she drove out to the same cliff overlooking the river where her father used to take her as a child. The sky was painted gold, the water calm, the world somehow smaller and kinder. She took out the last page of the folder, a photo of her father and Andrew, standing side by side in the workshop, grease on their hands and laughter caught midair. On the back, scrawled in her father's handwriting, were 3 words, "Always tell them." She folded the photo, pressed it to her heart, and whispered, "I did." As the wind lifted her hair, she closed her eyes and breathed. The camera would linger here, wide shot, the cliff bathed in sunset, her silhouette framed against the open sky. The sound of the record's crackle would fade into the rustle of leaves. Then, slowly, a faint smile would ghost across her lips, not from joy but from release, the kind that comes when you stop running from your ghosts and start walking beside them. In the final moments, she turned back toward her car, the light catching her face. No longer the broken daughter, no longer the vengeful survivor, but something in between, a woman who had made peace with the truth and with herself. The screen would fade to black as her footsteps grew distant, leaving behind only the sound of the wind and her father's voice, faint and warm, echoing from memory. "I'm proud of you, kid." If this story touched something in you, if you've ever fought to be heard, loved someone who left too soon, or carried a truth too heavy to tell, don't scroll away. Hit like if you felt her pain, subscribe for more stories that stay long after the credits fade, and comment below what truth you would fight for. Because somewhere, someone's silence is waiting to break, and your voice might be the one that helps it echo.